Welcome to The Leaders Who Care, a podcast powered by Dynamis Group. We are here to give the stage and support to those committed to create a positive and lasting impact, way beyond the profits and margins, the leaders of the world who care for others and serve a bigger purpose. Join us on the journey of creating a better, more caring world. And now to your host, Marian Temelkov.
Dear audience, it's my joy to be here today, and we have a great guest today, somebody that I was so looking forward to have today on our podcast, and I would love to welcome Zane Bojāre. I hope I pronounce your name well, Zane.
That is well pronounced. Well, hi, Marianne. Great to be here.
Well, first of all, thank you for taking the time. For the audience, as most of you know, we are on a mission to bring some of the most caring leaders from every corner of the world and create a platform where we bring them together to amplify and spread care for a more caring world. And I've been impressed with some of the things that you guys are doing in Startup Wise, guys. And really, Zane, you're one of the key figures, leaders that you've been at the forefront, not only from communication, but doing a lot of things behind the scenes and also quite actively on many operational topics. So thank you once again. And just if you could kind of share an introduction of how did you arrive where you've arrived today? What would be like just some of the key highlights or major highlights of your life will be fantastic. As
that can take like a whole hour, but I'll try to be shorter. So first of all, I am so grateful that there is a podcast like this, Leaders Who Care, and I was just posting on social media and thinking that it's such an important topic to talk about, and therefore I'm really looking forward to our conversation, Marianne. But to answer your question, I guess all of us as humans, there's a lot of sides like a diamond, right? There's different sides that have and different things that have shaped us. In my case, so I'm a proud Latvian. I'm calling in today from Riga. And I have I'm a sibling in a 4 kids family that definitely has also shaped me. I was the third, so there's probably some kind of psychological factor that you have to fight for attention. But the way I decided to do it is actually through education and through developing myself. I felt that that's the way I can get the attention of my parents in the sibling rivalry. I'm a mom. I have 2 beautiful daughters, and the youngest one has just started school, so they're already quite big. And it is definitely a transition in my parenthood as well, seeing them develop as personalities, and also detaching myself and understanding that there's only so much I can do, and they're stepping bigger and bigger steps in their own independent life. Actually, my experience both in workplace but also in education has been very. I would say it's a very simple word, interesting. I started off with art. And when graduating kindergarten, I said I want to be a painter. So I've always had this creative soul. But however, later on, I went to study in the first gymnasium in Riga. And that is a school that is very well known actually for sciences and mathematics, which was an interesting turn away from art after graduating in art school. And once I had these 2 things of a triangle, right? I had the creative and I had the mathematics and science. I was like, okay, what's next? And I took a very brave decision, thanks to my dad, actually. When most people were going to look for very practical higher education, such as law or economy, I actually went to study philosophy. And I was studying it for 6 years. So I have a master's degree, and I was laughing that I have no clue what I'm going to do in the workplace, but at least I'm big time really enjoying the studies. And I think it's such a luxury to actually spend 6 years to really deep dive into human thought, to analyze yourself, to analyze what's happening with society, to look at history of how science has been developing. And I would say that definitely this third step in education shaped me big time. However, now I'm here in the startup bubble. This is the 6th year counting that I work for Startup Wise Guys, and I'm actively working with founders from all over the world, but especially Eastern Europe. I guess it was just a logical consequence of my previous work. I worked quite a lot in marketing and communications. I'm a public relations professional. After my first daughter was born, I felt like, no, like I don't want to go back into, I mean, I had amazing clients in my PR agency, but I still felt like I don't want to go back into selling things. I don't want to go back into proving to people that they should purchase a certain product or something. And I built a social enterprise together with my best childhood friend. I was laughing. It's the best and worst decision in my entrepreneurial life. And we created Lude, which was a company that was employing elderly people and trying to reduce the textile waste through creating design rugs. We were very aspirational young entrepreneurs with zero experience, also zero education in the field. Imagine I was a philosopher by education. However, it was extremely valuable experience. It was like a business school to me. We failed at some point, even though we managed to get quite some impact through our work. And when I had to figure out what I do next, I was like, okay, I'm going to go to Startup Wise Guys. At least I will learn how to do business the practical way, and also through teaching others. So that brought me to Startup Wise Guys. That is a startup accelerator, which means that apart from money, we also provide education to entrepreneurs, to aspiring young new founders, and I have never looked back. Back in the sense, I was so happy because this is a place that still, after 5 years, challenges me every day, and makes me develop, makes me look deeper, makes me learn new things, and also providing care and impact to hundreds of young entrepreneurs who are chasing their dreams. And we can add, that little thing on their journey. So it's also a very, very fruitful work. It's very rewarding work here.
I love that. By the way, listening quite attentively to you, what a great correlation between creative and mathematics. There is actually a link in that. What an interesting step going to philosophy, but that's actually helped you a lot with your articulation skills and ability to speak and communicate, which is why I guess the logical step you went into marketing communication, because it was really powerful. In fact, one of the key things for mental prosperity is ability to articulate yourself well. That can save you years of hardship and a lot of trouble. So you're an inspiration for that, and thank you for sharing this. Of course, it's okay to fail, as you guys know. Hopefully you can fail fast, as people say, but even if you don't, you learn lessons and along the journey. And here you are, you've arrived at a place where you are thriving. That's what I feel from the energy. Is that a right way to say that?
Yeah, well, I definitely believe in our life and journey being up and down. It's just natural, right? You have the moments when you thrive, and you have these moments when you have to, nurture yourself, and you have to kind of lay low, and allow this kind of new things be born within you. But I would say that I feel authentic. I feel like I'm in a very, very good place. And there's a lot of people who know my experience being social entrepreneur. If you asked me, I still believe at heart I'm a social entrepreneur. However, at Startup Wise Guys, we're very much purpose driven. We actually help founders become true entrepreneurs and change ecosystems through entrepreneurship. So actually, you could see Startup Wise Guys not only as an investment vehicle, but to some extent also as a social enterprise. At the end of the day, we work with people, and we actually work a lot with leadership as well, but we also simply work with them as humans, helping in this journey. And I'm probably jumping ahead few questions, but I would say that even when I look at these businesses, I look at these entrepreneurs, many people say, oh, the data show that they failed because they don't have industry experience, or data show that they were too early for the market. But at the end of the day, I do believe success lies within the humans. Can the founder be, for example, to run companies sustainably for himself. I'm not talking here about the environmental aspect, more kind of, can they be sustainable humans while running a fast-growing company, which is extremely challenging when you grow from 3 people to 100 people, when you need to hire fast, when you need to expand to new countries, when things fail. So in that sense, again, kind of very, very fulfilling, very, very great environment to be in.
I love that. And just to talk about social entrepreneurship, it's very, we're seeing that move and wave of those ventures. When you say social entrepreneurship, does it mean you can make profit? What is the definition there for the ones who are looking at, or even other entrepreneurs? What is your kind of, how do you look at that startup wise, guys?
Yeah, well, I would say that this is where I look at Zane and social entrepreneur, rather the startup wise guys. But definitely, if we look at social entrepreneurship itself, you asked a very, very difficult and tricky question, and that's the question this whole, if you can call it industry or the whole area, is struggling with, because you have the NGO people who are there to save the world, and often they don't know how to run business. On the other hand, you have these businesses who are like, okay, let's have some corporate social responsibility campaign, something. And they usually are still very, very much into profit, or at least kind of sustaining the business line. And then social entrepreneurship is kind of in the middle, right? Where you have to all the time balance. And I can honestly say that one of the mistakes that I did from business perspective, that in my social enterprise, in my previous job, I put too much effort on humans. I actually put too much effort on care, and I failed with certain aspects around business. However, if you ask me, would I make the same mistake knowing it? I would, because that's who I am. And so I would say that actually when we entered the social entrepreneurship field with my best friend, that was the challenge that we put to ourselves. We said, we want to prove that you can earn money while being caring about people, about the environment, and also about the market. So we from day one, we said we're going to pay fair salaries, which was extremely difficult. Then we were like, we will struggle with planning production because we were working with textile leftovers. So we actually could not plan production. So it was another layer of difficulty in the business. And yes, at the end, we failed selling. And also we started doing that. It was more than 8 years ago. So I would say also the market at the time, nobody knew what social entrepreneurship is, for example, in Latvia. And it definitely wasn't enough to sell. So you couldn't say, oh, you should buy this design rug only because it's made by elderly ladies. If we move to startup scene and to startup wise guys, we have actually changed our mission a little bit after 10 years, and we have added word sustainable in it. So we want to help founders build global, international, sustainable companies. We used to have tech companies, and this is the assumption that we have, that if you do things with a purpose, if you build a startup because there's a problem you see in the world and you want to fix it. And I'm not talking green energy necessarily. You can be very caring in edtech, education technologies, right? It's not maybe the typical sustainability angle, but it is extremely impactful, especially in the developing countries. And yes, we believe that that's the right way to go. But fun thing that I wanted to say about the social entrepreneurship after all of my journey, what I said, actually, the victory would be if regular businesses were caring and responsible, because social entrepreneurship is an artificial concept. And it is sad that we need a concept to signify something that to me seems straightforward. You run a company, you should be running it so that your employees are happy, satisfied, physically not tortured or not struggling. I was working with elderly ladies, for example, and it took a toll on the production speed. Also, you should be caring what happens after you in the environment. Like, where do you put your trash? Are you polluting rivers, right? To me, it's almost absurd that we have come, this full circle, and now we label things green and we label things fair trade. Isn't that shouldn't it be by default?
That should be the standard. I love what you just said here. In fact, This is one of our really vision and missions, really, to inspire more business leaders and businesses, organizations to really pay attention, if anything, more to the well-being of their people, to really their surrounding, their community, because you start with your closest. You don't just start with make the world more sustainable. I mean, that's a great, the world, in reality, the world is perfect as it is. It's a living organism. It will change. But what we, each one of us can do is positively impact it. And this is what matters. And you're right. It should not be social name companies, social entrepreneurs. You actually, your companies, but actually you do care about elements that of people around you, and that should be the common practice. I agree with you. Exactly. It shouldn't be, and it should be. What does sustainable means? I mean, because when you say sustainable, what is the first thing that you think of? Because it's so used. When you say sustainable, how was the definition of sustainable? In your view.
Yeah, to me, that has been even a challenge at my work as a marketeer at Startup Wise Guys, because we launched the program and we had to choose: are we calling it Wise Guys Impact or we're calling it Wise Guys Sustainability? And we had actually a lot of backlash from sustainability experts who are really academic around it, that we're actually abusing the term. And I agree that it's such a wobbly and big concept that I would say people put different things under. Some would put only if we'll talk about startup world, they would put only specific industries that go under, right? That you would put mostly it's related to CO2 emission reduction, green technologies, everything green energy and so on, or smart mobility, right? To me, I see this concept for the academics probably way too vague, but to me, well, it's anything that can be run long term, plus in a sustainable manner. So something that can sustain and be kind of see things beyond just yourself, just your business journey. For example, if we look back at Startup Wise Guys, we actually don't use sustainability that much for the business side. We use impact way more. But in our value statement, we have two things. We talk about long term and we talk about the ecosystem. So we talk about things around us and things time-wise way ahead. And if you just have these two factors, that there's something beyond you in the field where you're operating, and we're not talking about tomorrow, we're not talking about this year, we're talking about 10, 20, 30 years from now, then it already adds the sustainability angle naturally. Because you want your business or your people to be sustained, so they exist, and preferably exist in a good way.
This is what I love about your vision and concept here of supporting founders, because in reality, founders will need that help. And in order to prosper and be sustainable, there's multiple areas. To me, when I talk about sustainability, I look at first people first. How can we make sure that whatever we build and we can have we sustain our people there. That means their well-being is very important. But for their well-being, they're responsible for. So you need to be able to support them and make sure that you're mindful of this, create an environment where they can raise a great family, create an environment where they can physically doesn't take away years of their life, whether this is through the air, the quality, the working conditions. So when you talk about we focus on the founders, that's what I really appreciate a lot. So can you talk a little bit more about how do you really put founders at your business model at the center, and how do you take care of your founders? Because that is really essential. If the founder is there, can also make a difference, but also prepare for succession later on. But what is really your take on that?
That's a great question, and it's almost hard to understand from which angle to tell you. But if you will look historically, Startup Wise Guys turned 10 years this year, and I have been half of that journey. I joined in 2016. If we look at the very early days of the Startup Accelerator, we were laughing that at that time, and I think it was needed for the time, we were helping founders, mostly very techy founders, to become sales machines, right? basically to teach them how to sell better. And imagine the founders coming, especially from kind of Eastern Europe, with all of the historic heritage and relatively new economies. Of course, the technical skills definitely were there, but maybe not necessarily the business and sales skills. If we look at the last, I would say 3 years at Startup Wise Guys, I would say that the attention and the focus has really shifted towards founders and teams. Of course, it's a lot to do with our CEO, Cristobal Alonso, and also Stoyan Janko, and that a lot of the listeners recognize. They have also published a book that's called Perform. And for every Startup Wise Guys Accelerator batch, so for every 10 companies accelerating together, they would lead extensive workshop on this. But what we saw historically, kind of going through how the program happened, that just training the business skills is simply not enough. And a lot of founders said that they're like, yeah, like the sales strategy is great. You taught us. Yeah, you asked us good questions around the regulation or how to scale the business outside of our home market and things like that. So they said, yeah, the knowledge base is there. However, they said that these 3, and now it's 5 months long program, said it actually changed the mindset. And that's the most important thing. And mindset is something that has to change in the head of the human, right? It's not something external. It's not an educational program. So that's just one thing that we observed, that focusing on humans, helping them build their companies better. And a lot of founders say, I came in with a product, I came out with a company. That's also something that don't understand. Product alone is not a company, because there's a lot more around it, because there are humans involved, not just technology, right? And for a lot of people who are very techies and introverts and don't have experience running teams, that's quite a learning. But what we saw, that it actually also creates impact on the returns. We are a private investor, so we're a private fund. We actually have our investors that we need to bring money. So Startup Wise Guys is not only a social entrepreneur, it's a money-making machine. But what we see, that working with founders deeper, kind of really touching the soul, the heart and the brain, it gives those returns. Yes, maybe not tomorrow. The return cycle is quite long. We often have to wait 5 years till they actually exit and bring money to the fund. We're ready to wait, because we see also this ripple effect. And I like, Marian, you said about we have to start with the closest. And when we talk about what is our impact, we say, okay, maybe we don't have startup unicorns full in our portfolio. We have invested in Bolt, though, and we're waiting for the successful companies to come out. But even if they grow kind of in a steady pace, they hire people, they pay taxes, and they have a good culture. So they're a good employer, they're a caring employer. The ripple effect of that is amazing. And again, that's where we see the value, that we could come in a certain geography. Right now, we have first program in Africa. We're changing mindsets, 10 startups at a time. But imagine if they go out in their ecosystem and they bring this heritage of, hey, this is how a business should be run. You actually should care about the culture in your company, not then just like, oh, it's midnight, we still have to finish, that product launch. Yes, sometimes you have to, but you have to have this fundament. And we just see great value in it. And secondly, I was thinking about this conversation, and I knew you would ask something in this direction. And I do believe that this care for humans is a feminine thing. It's very interesting. We're working in a very masculine industry. We're working basically in the investment industry, which is also very dominated by male leaders. However, and I'm not even saying that you have to be a female person. Like I just think it's like a femininity. It's like a feminine energy when you deeply care. And I can see that when I talk to my colleagues, and we have grown. When I joined the company, we were 6 people, and we're now 60 almost, and we have 25 nationalities. So imagine the mix. I see that there is a common trait. You can only thrive at Startup Wise Guys as an employee if you deeply care for the founders. And if you don't, and if you're there to make your, salary check, or just to make money as a venture partner for yourself, it just doesn't work in a long run. And we have a lot of females in our team. We have also on a partner level. I'm very happy about it. But still, I think our CEO is just kind of very good with finding people who deeply care about founders. And therefore, it doesn't take an extra energy. If I go into a mentoring session, it doesn't take extra energy. It actually recharges me. because I have this connection with the person, and I can also see how my knowledge or my approach to things can really make an impact on that journey. It can really make an impact on that person.
You said something interesting, which, to be honest, I'm not so sure it's only feminine, to be honest, because the men do care too, but they care in a different way. So if we go back into our ancestors, how did men care? Well, by hunting, killing the animals, and bringing the food home. So and that was essential, or by guarding the tribe. They are the ones. So that is some of the greatest sense of care. So it's not only feminine, but it's just to the feminine expression of care is to be concerned about, because that's the way about something, and really having that elegant way of understanding people, and not be, because obviously, and we do need that balance. I say definitely we need a feminine balance, but I wouldn't exclude the masculine care of it, because, for example, to me, telling the truth is one of the highest level of cares, because, and sometimes men can be very abrupt and harsh of telling the truth to people. So, but it doesn't mean they don't care. Maybe their delivery is not right. That's what they need to work on. But they still get it, and if they deliver it, work on it, which is why we need the feminine, energy, I think. But here, you said something also interesting earlier. You can overcare. Can you give me an example where that has happened? And when you were tested, you were put to the challenge, because that is a very important topic. While we talk about care, we need to be really very clear of what does it mean, and when it goes in the negative way.
That actually goes very well together with the masculinity part that you mentioned, and I actually thank you for sharing, because that's an aspect I hadn't thought about. But even if we look at our business, if there's no money to invest in startups, we can care as much as we want, right? And we won't be able to help. So thanks, Marian. I think it's a kind of very, very important aspect, and it is a lot about exactly how does it come through. And I agree, we are more used to associate human-related care to kind of feminine things, but this brings me to the Overcare topic, that care can take very different forms. And we often we can make mistakes in kind of what is our concept of care. In my case, usually these my mistakes have mostly come from my own ego. For example, when I became a manager of a team, it was still just one person that I had to manage. Hi, Louise, if you're listening. I somehow mistakenly assumed that my role as a manager is to nurture her emotionally and really create this super guarding environment. For example, if there was any escalation of a conflict, I would take it over. If there was any criticism, I would kind of like calm it down. And in a way, after 2 years of time, I realized that actually my care came from myself. So I was thinking that how can I prove that I'm a good leader here, that I'm a good manager? And actually, I didn't look at what are the needs of my employees. What do they truly need, both as a personalities, but also as professionals executing on a particular thing that they get paid for? And actually, instead of this emotional nurturing and let's talk things through, which is still needed, actually, my colleague was missing planning. She was missing clarity. And I didn't see it because I was so overwhelmed with being this very caring leader. And I think this is very important to kind of step out of your own ego, step out of yourself, and see the bigger picture. We were talking before we started the live stream about children. I'm a mother of two, and my oldest daughter is entering the teenage years and so on. So it's been quite a journey already. And I realized that over parenting, or this helicopter parenting, can be some of the most harmful things you can do to children, because actually in the long run, the more self-sufficient they are, the more self-sustainable they are, the better. To give you actually a very kind of sad example, there was a story in the news about recently in Ukraine that there was a child, I think he was barely 11 or 12 years old that had basically alone managed to leave country with just one bag in his hand. That means that he was traveling for hundreds and hundreds of kilometers to an unknown place. And he was even smiling on the border when he was met by other people. And I was thinking, honestly, like if my kids had to do this, would they be capable of? And when am I a good parent? Am I a good parent when I react to every need? And my youngest is very good at this. Mommy, bring me the things. Mommy, can you dress me? She's 7 years old, soon turning 8, right? And I'm looking at her and thinking, yes, egoistically, I might want to be the good mommy who's always smiling and always bringing things. But in a long run, can she do things herself? Can she cook for herself? Can she lock the door? Can she find places? What would she do if she would be in trouble? And I think these things are very similar at the household and also in the work environment, that when we overcare for people, sometimes we lose boundaries, and sometimes we start accommodating emotional needs where there would be a work for a therapist, not a colleague and not a boss. And that means that if you overcare, you create this environment where that's welcome. And not everybody is capable to manage their emotions. And sometimes the workplace can turn into this, like, oh, I'm going to come and vomit all of my emotions. But that's not the place, right?
And it's not sustainable. What you're saying here is it can bring good feelings, but then these are good feelings to you, which is more self-centeredness as opposed to more care, because you are thinking of you more than what about my child? How do I define success? How would they be thriving in life rather than surviving? These are the things we need to teach them skills, teach them how to overcome obstacles. It's like the butterfly, to become a butterfly, it has to go through a process of working hard to come out as a butterfly. If you help that process, it will die. So what's very important is that they have these challenges that they deal with it. But yes, you can be by their side, the emotions that, and I know it's not easy to implement, but believe me, and to the listeners, please do. It will be one of the best things that you will have, because how you measure success in what you talk about is not just the short term. Think about the long term. Are you really uprising or bringing children that are heavily dependent on their parents? That means you will not have any time for yourself later on. It will be continuously, and you'll get tired, and as a result, you might die earlier. So what you're thinking, maybe I actually, they always think of the consequences when you make a decision. That's my philosophy. Defend the consequence of what you do. And if you think, and same with business owners and founders. Well, if they want to develop or grow others, ability to develop. So one thing is to be good at something. The other thing is to develop people and others. Think about, what does it mean for you and your vision? Do you want more free time for you? That means, yes, I do. Okay, well, that means you need to develop your people in a way that they can take decisions without your presence, which may go deep down with some insecurities you may have, because you want to be controlling everything. Or if that's the case, you got to make a decision. Do I want to be controlling, or do I want more free time? So make that decision. If you want more free time, you need to be ready for the consequences, which may be mistakes that can happen. So how you react to that mistakes is very critical, because if you shout and if you make a very big deal about the thing that you've allowed, that means that they'll probably never do that again. They'll never take a risk, and they'll paralyze the whole organization. So it's just these decisions that are very interesting, also in parenthood, but also in terms of business leading. And that. So thank you for really bringing that over caring concept, because please do not over care. That is the message, because over care is also self-centeredness or selfishness. Is not necessarily the real meaning of care. You got to actually understand of what you do about the other person.
I think it's also very important, where is it coming from? I'm a big believer that generally things that come from a wrong place in a long run will not work. And if you are coming from, even in parenting, I'm a big fan of Montessori pedagogy, and one of the core concepts there is observation. And I was laughing that if us as parents would have the time and the patience to observe our children, we would have all of the answers. And besides, we would have those answers not from our egocentric, or not maybe, sometimes it's not even egocentric, it's just unconscious that you have these models that a good mom or a good dad does X, Y, Z, or you look at others and you're like, oh, they do this, so I have to be doing that as well. But if you allow this pause, if you allow this time for observation, and if you step out of yourself as an egocentric being, I think that's where a lot of true stuff comes out, true care, and also kind of truly seeing the other person. And it is very difficult in our environment. I'm a working mom. I actually spend most of my day, my kids were yesterday drawing, what does your mom do? How does she work? And my daughter drew a computer. And I was like, that's sad. But I think it is very important also in the workplace to have this space to observe the people and to deeply try to understand where do they thrive or what they might be facing right now. Sometimes those things are absolutely not related to work, but if they are cared for or managed in the right way, actually in a long run, it's very, very valuable for the business itself.
Absolutely. And we have a great question here from Stoyanenko, who we both really honor and appreciate. Stan, thank you for this question. And it is a great podcast. No, I know the value alignment are highly important to you in the Startup Wise Guys. Can you share an example where your values were put to the test and how caring is to you to live in your values, no matter in the circumstances?
Thank you, Stoyan. You know well our cultures. Stoyan is also a long-term mentor at Startup Wise Guys, and he has seen it kind of a bit from the inside. There has been a lot of cases when our values are put to test. And by the way, even defining values was a very difficult task. We spent 1.5 years to write the culture manifesto that's right now on our website. It was really kind of a long journey for us. Just because we understand that the culture is something extremely important to succeed, but also very important to have a team of people who are actually in a good place, right? Mentally, physically, and so on, that can actually be sustainable. We have one of the values is that we are always founders focused. And we have a lot of cases, for example, in our so research for startups. To select 10 startups, we need to look at least at 200 startups. Mm-hmm. Very often, what we see is that startups have very, especially coming from less developed startup ecosystems, they might come to us with already what we call is bad cap table. What it means that they might have had an investor that has come in with not maybe a very big chunk of money, but they have taken big part of the company. So they have taken a lot of shares. What it means in the long run is that the moment the startup starts growing, with every investment kind of step, they would have to give away shares. If in the early days they have given away more than 10% of their company to a small investor, it means that it's just not going to work in the long run. They will come to a place where they have no shares to give and they won't be able to fundraise, or they will have no returns to themselves as founders. So imagine you might be building a company for 5 years, basically kind of, and building a startup is like takes a toll on your family, takes a toll on your mental health, on your physical health, and then we end up with nothing. So we see this risk very, very early on. And we are not afraid to pick enemies here, because in very many cases, what we would do, we would actually reach out to these early investors of the startups, either through the team of through the founders or ourselves, and we would say, hey, if you want this company to grow in a long run, you actually have to give back some shares. And we know it sucks because you have given money and you have taken some percentage, but it's simply not going to run. It's not going to work. And there are people out there who probably would say a lot of bad things about us just because of this. But that's the part where we're like, we are true to our values. We have had also a case with a larger corporate partner that wanted to give a bad deal to the founders. And we were like, okay, on one hand, hey, here's the cash to pay for salaries if we take this project. On the other hand, here are the founders. Can we look them in the eye and say, yes, take this deal. It's a good deal, but it's not, because you take too much percentage. We went back to this particular partner and we said, we can't work like this. We're not going to take this project. But there was the beautiful thing that after we were so strict about us, and there was like 3 attempts saying, hey, this is not a good deal, you should change the deal. When we said, okay, we're stepping out, They actually changed the deal also for other partners to be better for the founders. And at that point, I was like, I am so proud that I work for this company. Another case, and it's not even that much it's more related to care and less maybe even directly to the values, but we do have the word care in our culture manifesto as well. More recently broke down in Ukraine. We have 5 Ukrainian team members, and we have, I think, 38 investments in Ukrainian startup companies. So you could just imagine how close, real, and painful, and it still is, but especially the early first weeks were. And the first day we were having a team managers call, that's a middle level management. And there alone, we have 3 Ukrainian ladies. First of all, we were just crying in that call because there's nothing else you can do. It's just uncomprehendable, right? But the second thing, and I think I'm amazed about our CEO, Cristobal Alonso, he said, you know what? Anybody in this company of 60 people who feels like they need to take 100% of their time and dedicate it to helping their families or just helping people in Ukraine or anybody else affected by this war, do it. And some of our colleagues are still partially working. All of our Ukrainian colleagues took away at least 2 weeks, some 1 month. And my very good friend Karina, for example, said, it's unbelievable that I was allowed to do it and I still received my salary. But if you look at the flip side, it's that everybody was so deeply affected. Nobody was capable to work anyway. At least we were allowed to put our knowledge, to put our time, to put our skills into something that was meaningful. So we actually launched a whole kind of support campaign for people who are trying to flee through the boundaries of Ukraine, because we have a very international network. So we could help people find, for example, where to stay overnight in Hungary or in Poland or in Germany. And we're still supporting people, leveraging our very, very large and caring community. But and for example, in marketing, where of course, on one hand, nobody does marketing in times of war, especially when it's so fresh, it was obvious that we will not be doing. But some of the people who were allowed to take their time off were from very core business functions. And I was sitting there and I thought, oh my God, this is also so smart. Because imagine you told a person whose family is in war, said, you know what, no, you sit and you work 8 hours a day. It would not work anyway. And when you give this freedom, you get this trust. And I think if we look at care, why I think care is very important in leadership and in business, I read somewhere research that to successfully function and actually to be performing well as a company, but also especially in partnerships where you have different cultures meeting, is the mutual trust that actually is the deciding factor. Will you work? Can you trust somebody who doesn't care for you? Can you trust somebody who has no interest in even knowing, do you have kids? Is your mom alive? How are you doing today? Are you having a good day? Are you having a bad day? And again, of course, you have to balance this masculinity, femininity. There you can't go and talking half an hour about your mom's health in a work call. But I do believe that this, for example, in the case of our CEO making this decision, he definitely deeply cared for the people. But in the long run, you should see the motivation of our Ukrainian colleagues right now returning slowly, step by step, back to work. And I don't think that anyone had any doubts that they are working that they're in the right place.
No, thank you for sharing these examples. You're absolutely right. It's very important to really, and normally the spirit tells you deep down, it knows what is the right or wrong to do. Of course, it's not easy sometimes to do because we are tied up to or afraid. And one of my personal really passion is to free people up from fear, because if there's fear, something is not working, and you got to make sure that you get out of this, because fear is not something that you can build on. It will collapse sooner or later. And I think it's very important that you really do the right thing and help. And this is really an honor for you guys that have helped so many of them with everything you can. But Zane, just to when it comes down to the sustainability part and the personal well-being part, how do you take care of yourself? How do you're a mom of 2, you're working with so many founders, you've seen so many cases, you've seen when they fail or succeed. Do you see a common thread, obviously, in those founders, the ones that who make it or who don't, in their personal well-being and their personal care?
It's kind of like two-folded question. The part about myself, actually, we had a long conversation with Stoyan a while back and his podcast about mindfulness versus ambition, where we talked a lot about it. I'll touch upon it a bit after, because I do have a lot of habits, and they were put definitely to test with the recent happenings in Ukraine and overall in the world. I think everybody kind of lost the fundament, and returning to them, I think, is the secret how to reduce also the fear level and kind of like base yourself. But if we look at the founders, first of all, I think different things work for different people. There are some who need extremely strict regime and discipline. There's some who need to embrace the day. Like, for example, I'm the kind of person I can have very high productivity peaks, and then I have kind of have a low day when I'm like I can't do anything. And I have that comes from philosophy, but I have a very kind of lovely saying that I do believe big time, and it also goes back to care and even parenting. Know thyself. So you have to know yourself. You have to spend time exploring what works for you. And if I see the founders who have figured their way, and I don't know, like sometimes I'm not saying that that's a good thing, but maybe sometimes it's like hardcore sports and getting drunk on Friday. Hey, if it works for you and you don't kill your health through that, then it works for you. But basically, I would say that the big thing is clarity. And this is something that actually I have taken from a very good course on the Commune platform. That's one thing where I recharge my batteries intellectually. I always forget the name of the author, but he was talking. He has a book about high performance, and he actually said that it was a surprising research of high performing people, both in personally, but also in the business, that the common trait was not creativity, was not amazing leadership, nor people skills. It was seeking clarity. And what does it mean that you have these no BS, right? As you said, like care can be saying how things are, saying the truth. That's exactly that, and it goes both ways. It goes towards yourself, so you have to know yourself. You also have to be realistic with yourself. My physical trainer has a joke. She's like, sometimes you have to look in the passport at how old are you, and maybe not do crazy things. But it also goes towards the other people, right? That you, for example, towards your team, towards your customers even, and the clearer sight you have on these things, I think the closer you are to succeed. And sometimes success can't be measured in financial metrics. I have no bitterness about failing with my social enterprise. There was a lot of success metrics there that I'm very proud of, and I would still do those things. Maybe I would sell outside of Latvia earlier. That's the only thing I would change. So definitely, and actually, when we look at the founders. Very often, well, you have heard that actually even physical health, but especially mental health, is a very high risk when you're building these very fast growing companies. I would say those are abnormal circumstances, even for entrepreneurs who have the grit and who have the kind of mental power to sustain themselves. And we also have recognized it, and we have introduced mental toughness afternoons in our program. I'm a big lover of that because I also participate there. And we actually encourage people to, first of all, not fear of concepts like meditation, mindfulness, yoga, nutrition, and things like that. Secondly, to have peer-to-peer connections. And for example, in one of the programs, we had a founder he was doing amazing things in terms of mindfulness and meditation. And there were other founders who were like, oh, the maximum that I do to nurture myself is drink water every day. So, okay, step by step, but it's great that you connect because, for example, that founder said, I meditate before sales calls. It helps me to have clearer mind and to do better business. And if I went there and said, oh, you should meditate, they're like, yeah, whatever. What is this marketing lady saying? But if it's another founder in your peer-to-peer community who says, hey, actually taking care of my mental state helps me in business, that's something very different, right? It unlocks things. But to quickly answer your first part of the question, how do I deal with myself? I am a big believer that we are that to really be sustainable as a human, you have to take care of all the parts of it, right? We have a physical body. We need to eat. We need to eat well. We need to move. We need to sleep well. And I'm very happy that there's a lot more and more knowledge around this, that how to nurture your body. We live in this body. We are limited by it. And if your body is not supporting you, well, you can't do all of those bigger things, right? Then I do believe that there has to be a lot of things related to mental, to spiritual, to emotional aspects of life. For example, when both, I think, pandemic and the Ukraine war have been two very, very big triggers, I would believe, for anyone in the world. And I don't know if it was for you the way, but for me, when the fear kicks in and the uncertainty kicks in, even though I'm very extrovert, I kind of hide in my own, little bubble. And I have a very good friend, the one that I was building my business together with, Solvita. She's a mom of 5, actually. And she told me, we need to get out of our little hiding bubbles, out of our little houses, because only when we talk with each other, when we express these fears, when we talk about coping mechanisms, we actually can deal with it. And this is the part where we are social animals, right? So I do believe that there's a lot of things that you have to do. Definitely, I'm a big fan of meditation, even I don't do it that much. And for anybody listening out there, I definitely encourage you not to freak out and not to think it's some kind of like spiritual gunchi vunchi. There are very different ways to meditate. And if it's just you sitting for 5 minutes and just kind of relaxing, breathing, and kind of not getting attached to your thoughts, it's already great. It's already a good thing. Of course, if you want to go deeper, there's a way to go deeper. I started a bullet journal. Actually, have it here. That's one of the things. That's one of the habits that has really, really helped me this year. And it actually helps me not only to succeed with things that I want to do. It really helps me to calm down. And to be kind of like, for example, I write intentions of the week, and my daughter had a name day this week. So I wrote a very simple intention. I want her to have a blast. But it really helped me throughout the whole week thinking, am I actually helping that intention to come through? And there's a lot of things that I do. And as I said, like, I think you have to take care of different aspects of your life. But one fun thing that really surprised me, and that and I will dedicate this comment to anybody who's afraid of numbers and finances, I had never expected that getting my personal budgeting in order would have such a calming effect on me. I'm a spender. I'm the kind of person that worries, like, at the end of the month, where did the money go? And I have a very, very good friend of mine and also a colleague, Karina, who helped me on my last year's New Year's resolution. We were celebrating together, and I said, I really want to get my personal finances in order. And now, like, I do it regularly, I track them. And it is actually so interesting, because dealing with your money is both an exercise of mindfulness, but this is also extremely grounding activity. And I do believe that money, like many other things, it's actually an energy. And it's just fascinating how these kind of little things, you do a little bit of journaling, then you meditate a little bit, then you go for a morning run. I have also found a hobby. I've started playing paddle tennis, and I'm just like, I love it. So all of those things, they build up, and you end up being better human. You end up being better to yourself and also to the people around you. And I think to deeply just to be able to care, you have to be, you can't be in a fear zone. You can't be in the uncertainty zone, and you have to have your resources. So this is where I come back to know thyself. So how do you feel your resources, and how do you feel different resources, from body to your emotional well-being, to your spirituality?
I love that. I always look at, just for the listeners, to do well in life, whether this is in business or anything, it's not enough I see a lot of people that are financially very wealthy, but they still, their health is not at a good place. The relationships are also suffering. So there's a lot of those, and it's not easy, of course, to master them, because there's an order that you need to follow in order to prosper in this life. And there are 5 key categories that you need to pay attention to. And you mentioned already, and thank you for doing that. But the number, and the order also matters, I mentioned. The number 1 is your spiritual prosperity. Start with that, really. For me, that's, that to me is the number 1 thing, when the most difficult of times, that helped me in everything else. When you start understanding, when I put God first in everything I do, then everything comes. But then how do I know who God is? So you got to understand who God is. So you got to go through that journey yourself to get to that point. Then second thing is mental health, mental prosperity. And when I call mental prosperity, I put several key things. And this is an example of how to be mentally prosperous look like. You are sharp. Your will is on point. Whenever you say something, you do it. You're articulate. You're able to express yourself. You're able to manage well your reaction to your emotions. Your emotions are good, regardless whether you have anger or not, but how you react is very important to it. Your ability to see through others, your ability to understand people very, very well. Your memory is really great. You memorize things. So this is what mental prosperity looks like too. The third piece is your bodily prosperity, your health prosperity. In other words, and there's 2 categories there. Your eating, food can be a healer or can be a poison. So you make a decision. And your exercise, you nail those 2, and 95% of that category is done. And that's internal. So the first 3 are internal work. And the other 2, the last 2, financial prosperity. That means you do not have lack of anything, and you have abundant finance, which in turn gives you freedom to do and have more free time. And the last category is relationship prosperity, relational prosperity, where if you can only buy things with money, you're poor. Whatever money can buy, relationships can pay for it. Make sure that you take care of your own relationship with you. Like you said, understand who you are and heart and mind to be together. Make sure you take care of your family, your friends, the people around you, and your community as far as you can go, but also the order matters in that relationship. So when you nail those 5 categories, you will be called prosperous. And you will live exceptional life. So thank you for really sharing this already, and I'm a great fan of that. And there aren't many people who have done it, but there are people who have done it. I want to see more people out there that are financially prosperous, that are obviously not to the compromise. They started to spiritually, they understand deep, they have depthness. That's what it means, deep understandings and principles of how to live such a life. Mentally, there's no depression, or this is a distant. It's not known what this means, because you understand that your body, you look healthy, you look like people look at you and say, wow, that's great. And of course, you have the abundance financially to do the things you do, and your relationships you take care. And it all requires conscious effort, and make sure that you understand. But it's not easy to do all those categories. So one by one, this is my message and encouragement to who is listening, to our listeners, but also especially the startup founders and startup wise guys that are there. And maybe you could also share your advice and encouragement to them as your kind of message to wrap up.
Thanks, Marian, for systematizing my approach. I do believe that it is like this, that you mentioned 5 areas, and it's like 5 legs. And if one of those legs is limping, you're going to fall, no matter how good you're dealing with something. Yeah. There was also one of my mistakes in life, that I was at some point very careless for my body. When I wasn't building a startup yet, but I was working for a PR agency, which was very demanding work. And I didn't see how much I burned myself. And I was having repetitive sicknesses, and I couldn't get out of them without antibiotics, and I learned it the hard way that actually you need to be physically well, you need to be emotionally well, and so on. So definitely plus one to what you said. But also I remember in this course about clarity, the author also was talking about, I think Bernhard Burchard was the name. He was talking about 10 areas, and then he said that neglect is the worst. So even if you don't do amazing, you need to do something. So he said, even if you're still in a journey, and I'm very, very far from kind of like this absolute amazeness. One day I feel like a bad mom. One day I feel like a bad colleague or a bad boss. And I actually would say that it doesn't cancel out the effort. You should have the effort. You should not neglect. I had neglected finances because I was like, that's not my problem. I'm not good with numbers. I'm not doing anything kind of crazy, but I'm just tracking things and it already helps. I haven't even started doing proper investments. I'm going to do that later. But what I want to say is that step by step, if you're in a very, very bad place right now because of what's happening in the world, take the smallest steps you can do. Just wake up. Just have a nice coffee, tea, or whatever smoothie. And kind of also sometimes the weight of the world and this kind of overachievement, this kind of need to succeed, I think it actually makes us less capable. Sports have taught me a lot lately, and I was just talking with my friend in the morning run about that I'm right now just beginning a new sports and I'm failing a lot. So I go there and I know most likely I will lose. And I don't like to lose. Nobody, I think, in the startup world likes to. But what I realized, if I go there with like, okay, today I'm going to learn how to do this one thing, and today I'm going to challenge myself on something. These smaller steps help moving forward when maybe the environment around you is not that supportive. So what I want to say is, on one hand, do the effort. Nobody is going to do it for you. Not your mom, not your kid, not your partner, nobody. It's up to you. But if you're in a place when things are kind of not working out, or you're in a deep shit, I'm sorry for the word on a podcast, life sometimes sucks. Life sometimes isn't easy. Also, allow yourself to be there. And as I like what you said, Marian, and I will finish with that. You talked about emotions, and I see a lot of, especially men in the startup world, blocking them. They're kind of like, oh, I don't want to feel grief. I don't want to feel scared. I don't want this. Emotions are just symptoms. They just show that you're experiencing something, right? They just kind of, they're like these indicator lamps in a car.
They're compass. They're the greatest compass for where you are. Don't block them because you explode later. They are valid. Just understand yourself and you take a decision how to react. That's the key. That's the difficult part to do. How to react to those emotions.
Exactly, and there's kind of these almost like how to say, like a Bible for kids, that all emotions are good. Let all emotions be. But I would say, like anything, like that's where my philosophy education comes in, and as I think that relates a lot to what you talked about, the spirituality in this depth. All things in a long run are good if you believe in that. And there is this concept of necessary suffering to grow. Yes, you might be in that place where you're growing. Growth usually, especially if it's fast, doesn't happen out of happiness and out of niceness. And like if you're cuddly on your sofa and watching Netflix, most likely you do not necessarily grow in that moment. And I think it's important to recognize, when are you in what state? Sometimes you have this moment, hey, I'm resourceful, I'm good, I should push. And sometimes, I don't know, maybe something bad has happened in your life. You need to let yourself the space to be. You will have your ups and you will have your downs. Embrace the journey.
Thank you so much, Dana. This has been quite a great message. Take one step, small step at a time, and do not give up on your efforts and do not neglect things. And you will get there. Allow yourself to go through the emotions and learn yourself how to operate. What a great piece of advice and a lot of wisdom. Zane, thank you so much for sharing all those insights, being so open and really sharing both success and failures. This is really makes a difference. And whatever, guys, works for you, it's all individual, but there's certain pieces of advice and wisdom that you can start today. So our message is, just start a small step, one step at a time, and do not wait. There's a great life waiting for you. It's every day is a great one when you have it. So don't lose out. Don't miss out on any minute, second of your life. So no matter how difficult it is. Normally, I'd say the most difficult moments are your greatest moments. So look at that, because that's when you grow. Zane, blessings, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Marian.